Introduction: The Stoic Path to Unshakable Power and Magnetic Presence. Brother, what I'm about to share isn't just a set of rules or philosophical musings, it's a blueprint for living a life so grounded, so commanding, that people around you feel your presence before you even speak. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about mastering the art of response. It's the ancient practice of choosing your reactions, understanding human nature, and cultivating an inner citadel that remains untouched by chaos, manipulation, or the ever-shifting opinions of others. Most men go through life reacting to the world shaped by approval, validation, and fleeting desires, but a Stoic stands apart, not because he refuses to feel, but because he refuses to surrender his power to circumstances outside his control. Picture this: you enter a room, and immediately the dynamic shifts, not because you announced your intentions, not because you drew attention to yourself, but because your energy, your posture, your quiet confidence communicates that you are anchored, unwavering, and deliberate. People aren't used to that. They are accustomed to predictable, reactive individuals who bend to others' whims, seeking validation and fearing solitude. Yet, when someone steps into the world with calm, cultivated authority, it disrupts their assumptions, their expectations, and their attempts to influence or manipulate you. That is the essence of Stoic mastery: presence without performance, action without desperation, indifference to outcomes beyond your control, combined with a life rooted in meaningful purpose. And this is exactly why the lessons that follow aren't mere advice, they are strategies for building a life that demands respect and inspires desire, not because you seek it, but because it naturally emanates from who you are when you refuse to compromise your principles. The first lesson begins with something so counterintuitive that most men overlook it entirely. It isn't charm, effort, or even skill that makes you magnetic, it's indifference to the validation of others, coupled with purposeful action in your own life. Every Stoic understood this. Lesson 1: Indifference to validation is power, not arrogance. The first principle that every Stoic man must internalize is that indifference to the approval or judgment of others is not arrogance, it is sovereignty. Too often, men measure their worth by how others respond to them, by the attention they receive, or by the fleeting approval of those who hold no real stake in their growth. This is an illusion, a trap designed by our instinctive craving for social acceptance. When you learn to operate independently of validation, you immediately transform the dynamics of every interaction. Consider this: a woman or man accustomed to control through emotional leverage will attempt to provoke a response, to elicit attention, or to secure influence over your energy. If you react predictably, if you chase validation, you reinforce their control. But if you remain unshaken, calm, and aligned with your purpose, something remarkable happens: they begin to perceive you differently. They are unsettled not because you have sought to intimidate, but because your energy is no longer readable, no longer easily manipulated. You do not shrink, explain, or justify yourself. You do not bend to comfort them or prove your value. Instead, you allow your life to continue along a trajectory of significance. Your absence of reactive energy is not coldness, it is clarity. It communicates a subtle yet undeniable message: your worth is intrinsic, not contingent. Practical application: in daily life, start small. When someone tries to bait you into argument, instead of reacting, breathe, observe, and respond only when necessary with purpose. When someone seeks your attention to feel in control, let your priorities guide your engagement. Each moment of deliberate restraint builds internal authority. Anecdotally, imagine a friend or partner accustomed to your predictable emotional responses. The first time you step back, refuse to explain, and continue pursuing your personal goals, they experience cognitive dissonance. They expect the old version of you, and instead, they encounter someone who is calm. Lesson 2: Purpose is magnetic. Live beyond others' approval. The second principle of Stoicism, and one of the most overlooked, is the power of purpose. When a man's life is invested in something larger than fleeting approval, the magnetism he exudes is undeniable. Purpose isn't about being busy or accumulating titles, it is about having a reason to rise every day that aligns with your values and your vision. A man without purpose is like a sailboat without wind, at the mercy of external forces, drifting wherever the currents of opinion and circumstance carry him. But a man with purpose operates from a different frequency. He is grounded in self-determined action, a life that moves forward according to his own compass. Think of this: the men, women, colleagues, or society at large are unconsciously drawn to are those who aren't waiting for permission to exist. Their goals, projects, and commitments occupy their attention with such intensity that external validation becomes irrelevant. This is Stoic authority in action. The practical applications are vast. Begin by clarifying your core values and your personal mission. Identify the pursuits, projects, and disciplines that challenge you and cultivate growth. Whether it's fitness, skill development, entrepreneurship, or creative expression, embed your purpose into your daily schedule so that your time is not disposable, and your energy is focused. In social interactions, purpose manifests subtly but unmistakably. A man whose attention is invested primarily in his life rather than in constantly seeking the approval of others communicates a form of presence that draws people in naturally. The clarity of purpose is attractive because it demonstrates a life fully inhabited, unfragmented by reactive neediness. This is not hypothetical, it is observable in everyday dynamics. Consider the man who relentlessly invests in his craft, whether that's building a business, mastering a sport, or writing a book. He does not pause to ask if his efforts will be recognized or validated because his commitment is intrinsic. And yet, observers, friends, potential partners, colleagues cannot help but notice. There is an aura of self-sufficiency. The second dimension of purpose is its role as a filter and boundary. When your life is full of meaningful engagement, you automatically allocate your energy to what aligns with your goals. People and situations that drain, manipulate, or demand validation become easier to identify and avoid. A Stoic does not waste energy on those who cannot contribute to mutual growth or respect. Instead, he channels time and effort toward endeavors that reinforce his values and strengthen his inner citadel. Anecdotally, imagine a man in the early stages of a career or creative project who is also navigating social interactions. The friends, acquaintances, or romantic interests who demand excessive attention or emotional labor are naturally deprioritized not through resentment, but through alignment with purpose. The man is not cold, he is deliberate. He has a schedule, a mission, a focus that cannot be compromised by those who have no stake in his journey. This principle is particularly transformative when applied to dating and attraction. Women or people in general are drawn to men who have lives of substance, not because of superficial status, but because depth and commitment to purpose signal reliability, resilience, and intrinsic value. The tension created by a man's focus on meaningful pursuits is compelling. He does not need to convince or compete, he simply exists as a standard of autonomy, self-respect, and capability. Each day spent aligning action with purpose reinforces confidence, attracts genuine connection, and repels distraction. In short, purpose transforms you from someone reactive, desperate for attention, into a man whose life is magnetic because it cannot be easily swayed. It is the cornerstone of Stoic mastery, the reason others unconsciously respect and are drawn to you, and the mechanism through which indifference to external validation becomes natural and attractive. Lesson 3: Indifference is strength detached without disconnection. The third principle of Stoicism, and one that consistently separates the strong from the reactive, is the disciplined practice of indifference. This is not indifference in the sense of apathy, but a deliberate orientation toward what is within your control and a calm acceptance of what is not. In life, most men allow their emotional state to be hijacked by external forces, a harsh word, a cancelled plan, a rejected proposal, or an unmet expectation. Stoicism teaches that power lies in discerning what belongs to you versus what does not. The Stoic does not expend energy attempting to manipulate perception or control others' reactions, he focuses on action, effort, and intention areas entirely within his sphere. To illustrate, consider a man who invests deeply in a creative project. He may face criticism, rejection, or indifference from others, yet his sense of self, his satisfaction, and his purpose remain anchored. He does not demand approval, nor does he internalize negativity unnecessarily. This mastery over reaction is profoundly attractive and magnetically commanding in every human interaction, including romantic dynamics. Women, for example, unconsciously detect this autonomy. The man who does not bend to validation, who maintains composure in the face of emotional tests, and who treats attention as optional rather than compulsory, triggers intrigue, respect, and attraction. Practical application begins with mindful observation. Recognize the areas where you hand over control of your emotions to others. Is your self-esteem dependent on praise? Do you chase attention? Do you seek approval to validate your worth? Every moment you catch yourself doing so is an opportunity to redirect energy inward. Replace reactive patterns with conscious, value-aligned action. Practice responding deliberately rather than impulsively. Maintain presence in conversation without over-investing, and pause before reacting to provocation. This cultivates a quiet authority, others sense the steadiness and unconsciously adjust their behavior. The second dimension of indifference is its ability to reframe social dynamics and protect mental energy. When you stop over-investing in outcomes that are not fully within your control, you create space for clarity, creativity, and growth. Consider the anecdote of a man navigating rejection in a professional context. He sends a proposal, receives no response, and resists the urge to follow up obsessively. Instead, he returns focus to his priorities, refining other ideas and projects. Ironically, his indifference often triggers renewed interest from the original contact, not through manipulation, but because he has demonstrated autonomy and non-attachment. The same effect occurs in social and romantic interactions. When a man ceases to over-explain, justify, or plead for attention, he transforms from predictable and reactive to enigmatic and desirable. People naturally pursue what they cannot control. Scarcity, in emotional attention, creates value. By being deliberately unattached to external outcomes while fully engaged in personal pursuits, you communicate inner strength, reliability, and composure. Practical applications include setting boundaries. Determine what energy is worthy of investment and what is not. Stop explaining decisions that require no explanation. Walk away gracefully from conflict that yields no constructive result. Consciously practice silence in situations that typically provoke anxiety or defensive responses. Over time, the indifference born of Stoic discipline becomes effortless and visible. Your calm is a mirror that reveals others' projections, manipulations, and neediness while reinforcing your self-possession. In dating, business, and personal relationships, this form of indifference is magnetic because it signals that your world does not revolve around approval. Instead, your presence is optional, your attention valuable, and your energy untouchable. Mastery of indifference is mastery of freedom, the freedom to act without fear, to engage without attachment, and to live a life that cannot be disrupted by what lies beyond your control. Lesson 4: Purpose over approval. Build a life that attracts, not pleads. One of the most profound lessons in Stoicism, and one that consistently transforms not only internal peace but external influence, is the principle of purpose over approval. Far too often, individuals shape their lives around the expectations and validations of others, chasing fleeting praise, social recognition, or romantic attention. Stoicism reminds us that external approval is fleeting, inconsistent, and ultimately irrelevant to true fulfillment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me, we all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Translating this into modern life, consider the man who constantly seeks a woman's validation. His confidence rises and falls with her words, texts, and gestures. He structures his actions to gain her approval rather than living authentically. This is the antithesis of attraction and self-mastery. In contrast, the man who prioritizes his purpose, his career, creative ambitions, fitness, or personal growth creates a gravitational pull that naturally draws others, including women, toward him. Why? Because purpose signals self-sufficiency, competence, and value independent of anyone else's opinion. People are biologically and psychologically wired to notice those who are aligned with their own goals and principles. A practical example: a man invests 3 hours in his personal development each morning, attends meetings, works on projects, and maintains a disciplined fitness routine. He does not check for constant feedback from others. In his interactions, he communicates attention and warmth without dependence. Women perceive this indifference not as coldness but as confidence and self-possession. The subtle difference between a man who is busy building a meaningful life and one who is busy seeking approval is enormous. The first exudes purpose and sovereignty, the second desperation masked as engagement. Indifference to approval, paired with visible purpose, establishes a profound kind of attraction that no manipulation, charm, or performative behavior can replicate. Lesson 5: Indifference to validation, the hidden power of self-sufficiency. One of the most underestimated principles in both Stoicism and modern human psychology is the idea that indifference to validation is a form of power. Most people live their lives tethered to the opinions, reactions, and judgments of others, allowing external feedback to dictate mood, choices, and confidence. The Stoics, however, teach that external events including praise, criticism, attraction, or rejection are beyond our control. What is within our control is our response and our inner alignment. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "If it is not right, do not do it; if it is not true, do not say it." Applied to relationships and attraction, this means you do not need to bend, manipulate, or perform to gain approval. Instead, focus on your values, purpose, and actions. The power of genuine indifference lies in its subtlety. It is not coldness or aloofness, but a quiet, unshakable self-possession that communicates value without a single word. Women and people in general are unconsciously drawn to those who are emotionally independent because it signals inner stability, competence, and sovereignty. Consider an anecdote: a man consistently focused on his creative projects stops responding immediately to texts from a woman he is interested in. In the past, he would have replied instantly, seeking approval or reassurance. Now, he responds selectively, when he has something meaningful to add. Instead of chasing attention, he immerses himself in his purpose. She notices. Suddenly, his value is evident not through words or persuasion, but through consistent, purposeful action and calm self-possession. This shift triggers a psychological response. When someone is not immediately accessible or predictable, it creates curiosity, respect, and attraction. Indifference to validation is not manipulation, it is authenticity. By refusing to hand over emotional control to others, you reclaim energy that was previously spent on approval-seeking behaviors and instead reinvest it into growth, mastery, and self-expression. The practical application is simple but challenging: measure your actions by your standards, not external reactions. Avoid compulsively explaining, defending, or overextending yourself for acceptance. Let your decisions and presence reflect alignment with your goals. Every time you resist the urge to over-explain, to chase a response, or to seek reassurance, you build invisible strength, like a muscle growing quietly beneath the surface. The second aspect of indifference to validation is its compounding effect on personal freedom and long-term attraction. When you stop structuring your life around what others think, you open space to pursue genuine opportunities, take calculated risks, and live in alignment with your highest self. Anecdotally, men who adopt this principle report an unexpected outcome. People, especially women, become more invested and engaged. The reason is rooted in human psychology. Scarcity, unpredictability, and self-sufficiency trigger a deep, instinctive interest. Women, consciously or not, are drawn to men whose value is independent of their validation. This is fundamentally different from being manipulative or emotionally unavailable. It is simply being complete and whole on your own. To implement this in real life, start small. Stop seeking immediate approval in conversations. Set personal standards for how you respond to texts, requests, or compliments. Invest your time in activities that matter to you. Practice being present with others without the compulsion to win their validation. Over time, this indifference becomes natural, a reflection of a strong, autonomous character. Your life, goals, and values become the reference points for your decisions, not the opinions of those around you. By mastering indifference, you simultaneously cultivate freedom, resilience, and magnetism. You are no longer reacting to external forces, you are the anchor of your own existence. In the world of relationships, this principle becomes revolutionary. Rather than chasing interest, approval, or attention, you become the man others must earn. Lesson 6: Purpose over approval, the magnetic force of a life well lived. One of the most profound lessons in Stoicism and human behavior is that true magnetism arises from purpose, not approval. In every interaction, people unconsciously scan for value: who has control over their life, who is anchored in their own vision, and who is compelled by external validation. The Stoics, particularly Epictetus, emphasized that we should direct our energy toward what is within our control, our actions, intentions, and effort, and remain indifferent to what is outside our control, opinions, approval, or the fleeting attention of others. Translating this into modern social dynamics, especially in attraction, the most compelling individuals are those whose lives are already rich with purpose and direction. They are not empty vessels seeking to be filled by attention, affection, or recognition. Instead, their time, energy, and focus are devoted to meaningful goals, growth, and mastery. This is magnetic because it signals competence, self-reliance, and a life that is already fulfilling. Consider a practical example: a man pursuing mastery in his craft, be it fitness, entrepreneurship, or creative arts, has a packed schedule filled with meaningful challenges. He is occasionally present in social interactions but is not defined by them. His attention is deliberate, his presence intentional, and his value evident without needing to assert it verbally. A woman interacting with him senses this immediately. He is not performing for approval, he is naturally captivating because he is fully invested in something greater than the moment. The attraction arises not from manipulation but from a deep resonance with self-sufficiency and direction. Purpose over approval creates an energy of abundance. When you stop seeking permission, validation, or acknowledgement for every choice, you radiate authenticity. Others recognize that your decisions are deliberate, your time is precious, and your life is worth engaging with, not controlling. This is why indifference to approval combined with genuine purpose is irresistible. It creates psychological tension, subconscious respect, and curiosity that cannot be replicated through charm, flattery, or excessive attention. The key practical application is to audit your daily life. Identify areas where you act primarily to gain approval or avoid judgment. Shift your focus to what serves your long-term purpose, whether it's skill development, health, career growth, or creative expression. When interactions align with your priorities, engage fully. When they do not, practice calm detachment. By structuring your life around meaningful pursuits, you cultivate magnetic energy that naturally attracts those who respect, admire, or wish to engage with it. You are no longer at the mercy of fleeting validation, but the master of your own trajectory. The second aspect of prioritizing purpose over approval is the liberation it provides in social, romantic, and professional contexts. When you place your energy first on your own growth, interactions become intentional rather than reactive. You respond rather than chase, you contribute rather than beg for acknowledgement. For instance, consider the difference between a man who rearranges his life to please a woman versus one whose commitments reflect his own values. The first appears desperate, insecure, and predictable. The second is grounded, self-assured, and engaging. The latter does not diminish the possibility of connection, it enhances it, creating an irresistible balance between independence and relational openness. This principle also scales to career and creative pursuits. People who relentlessly seek approval in the workplace through constant validation, people-pleasing, or performance for recognition rarely command true influence. Their energy is diffused, their authority undermined. Conversely, individuals focused on their mission, honing their craft, and producing results attract genuine opportunities, collaborators, and followers without forcing influence or attention. In relationships, the effect is similar. When you are deeply immersed in meaningful endeavors, your indifference to constant validation signals authenticity and abundance. You no longer measure your worth by fleeting attention, you measure it through effort, achievement, and alignment with values. Lesson 7: Indifference to validation, the silent power. One of the most underrated and powerful lessons in both Stoicism and human behavior is the magnetic effect of indifference to validation. So often, people, particularly in relationships, measure their worth by the reactions of others, seeking approval, praise, or reassurance for every action. The Stoics warned against this centuries ago, teaching that true strength comes from anchoring your sense of self in your own principles rather than in the fluctuating opinions of others. Marcus Aurelius famously advised that we should never allow someone else's judgment to dictate our inner peace. In modern life, this translates into the quiet but profound influence of a person who is impervious to validation seeking. They do not perform, over-explain, or chase attention. Their calm detachment communicates a powerful, almost invisible energy that draws others in because it signals self-possession, stability, and authenticity. Consider a practical scenario. In social or romantic contexts, a man who constantly seeks reassurance: do you like me? Did I do the right thing? Projects insecurity. Every word and action signals scarcity, dependence, and emotional volatility. In contrast, a man who is genuinely indifferent to these cues, who responds thoughtfully when necessary but does not bend or scramble for approval, exudes confidence. He becomes unpredictable in a compelling way, not in a manipulative sense, but because he is not enslaved to the whims of others. This is the silent power of indifference. It shifts the energy of the interaction from reactive chaos to poised equilibrium. People are drawn to certainty, to individuals who are self-contained and deliberate in their energy. Indifference is not emotional coldness, it is the art of prioritizing your internal state over external reactions. Practically, indifference is exercised by consciously choosing which social interactions, opinions, or criticisms merit attention. Every time you pause before responding to a provocation, every time you resist the urge to over-explain or justify, you are exercising this principle. When your worth is independent of someone else's approval, you reclaim control over your emotional and psychological space. Consider the dynamic in a dating scenario. A woman who is used to eliciting emotional reactions through testing boundaries or provoking responses will find her usual strategies ineffective against someone who is truly indifferent. She cannot manipulate, predict, or destabilize him because his internal state is grounded. This principle also applies broadly at work, among friends, and in public interactions. Individuals who are anchored in self-validation are less likely to experience burnout, resentment, or reactive behavior because they are not constantly expending energy to meet external expectations. Practical implementation includes creating deliberate pauses in communication, refusing to overinvest in interactions where your presence is undervalued, and focusing on activities that reinforce your internal worth: work, creativity, learning, and self-mastery. Over time, this deliberate indifference transforms how others perceive you. They begin to notice your consistency, your autonomy, and your refusal to be pulled into chaos. Subtle cues: steady tone, calm posture, selective engagement convey more than words ever could. The Stoic lesson is clear: freedom and influence do not come from pleasing others, they emerge when you govern yourself first. Indifference to validation is a cultivated power. It is a shield against manipulation and a magnet for genuine respect, admiration, and attraction. By remaining anchored in your own principles and detached from fleeting approval, you achieve a presence that is rare, compelling, and fundamentally unshakable. Lesson 8: Rejection is the catalyst, not the verdict. Rejection is one of the most misunderstood experiences in life. Most people interpret it as a verdict on their value, as if someone's refusal, disinterest, or abandonment defines who they are or what they are worth. Stoicism, however, teaches us a radically different perspective. Rejection is not a judgment of your worth, it is a catalyst for growth and self-realization. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of distinguishing what is within our control and what is not, and rejection is a prime example of something outside your control. The moment someone rejects you, whether in love, in business, or in friendship, it does not diminish you, it simply reveals what is not aligned with your path. This reframing transforms rejection from a painful blow into a mirror reflecting opportunities for growth. Consider the example of a man who has been pursuing a romantic interest tirelessly, adjusting his behavior constantly to meet her expectations, and yet she withdraws. In the conventional mindset, this feels like failure, a reflection of inadequacy. But the Stoic perspective reframes this: the rejection is feedback, not condemnation. It exposes a misalignment, a mismatch, and in doing so, it grants freedom. He is now liberated from investing energy where it will not be reciprocated, and he can redirect his focus toward growth, purpose, and relationships that honor his worth. Rejection, then, becomes the catalyst that forces introspection, strengthens boundaries, and clarifies priorities. It is not a sentence of limitation but an invitation to evolve beyond dependency on external approval. The rejection's transformative power lies in the lessons it imparts when approached with intentional reflection. When someone turns away from you, the instinct is often to overanalyze, to replay conversations, to seek hidden faults, or to desperately attempt to reclaim their approval. Stoicism instructs us to resist this urge. Instead, every rejection should be viewed as a training ground for resilience, self-respect, and emotional sovereignty. Take, for example, an entrepreneur whose proposal is rejected by a client or investor. The immediate reaction may be disappointment or self-doubt, but those who adopt the Stoic mindset understand that rejection is data, not judgment. It prompts refinement, perseverance, and recalibration. In the emotional realm, a similar principle applies. When someone decides not to invest in your life, it is not an indictment of your value, it is a signal of incompatibility. By internalizing this lesson, you cultivate the strength to maintain composure, preserve dignity, and focus on endeavors that truly reflect your worth. Practical application involves conscious detachment from the outcome and deliberate focus on what you control: your effort, your standards, your growth. For example, after a romantic rejection, rather than obsessing over what went wrong, you might redirect energy towards self-improvement, physical training, professional development, learning new skills, or expanding social influence. This shift transforms the sting of rejection into a fuel source for evolution. Over time, this approach creates an inner resilience that others perceive as confidence, poise, and self-mastery. People who have learned to embrace rejection as a catalyst rather than a verdict walk through life with a serene authority. They are not ruled by fear of judgment, by the need to be liked, or by the pressures of social validation. Instead, they are guided by a steady compass of internal values, and this grounded independence is magnetic, compelling, and profoundly liberating. Rejection stops being a weapon wielded by others and becomes a tool for constructing a stronger, wiser, and more aligned version of yourself. Lesson 9, Silence is power, not weakness. In a world that constantly rewards noise, reaction, and the need to be understood, silence is often misinterpreted as weakness, indifference, or passivity. Stoicism, however, teaches that silence is not the absence of strength but the presence of self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that the ability to remain composed in the face of provocation is a hallmark of true power. When you do not respond impulsively, when you choose not to justify yourself, explain your actions, or engage in unnecessary conflict, you assert control over your own mind and emotions. The space created by silence allows you to observe, reflect, and act strategically rather than react out of temporary emotion. Consider the example of a workplace dispute where a colleague attempts to provoke a reaction. Most people respond defensively, escalating tension and exposing vulnerabilities. A Stoic approach, however, is to listen, evaluate, and respond with deliberate calm or choose to remain silent when no productive outcome is possible. Your silence signals mastery of yourself, not submission to the opinions of others. It transforms you from a participant in chaos to a stabilizing presence, one whose influence is subtle but undeniable. In relationships, silence serves a similar function. When others attempt to manipulate, guilt, or provoke, withholding the impulse to react gives you clarity and preserves emotional energy. It is in the moments of deliberate quiet that the unspoken message resonates louder than words ever could. You are in control of your own emotional domain, and no external force can compel you to compromise it. The practical applications of silence extend far beyond avoiding arguments. Silence becomes a tool for self-preservation, reflection, and influence. For instance, in a romantic context, over-communicating or constantly seeking validation often diminishes perceived value and autonomy. A person who has learned the Stoic art of silence allows interactions to unfold naturally, responds with intention rather than instinct, and creates space for the other person to reveal their true intentions and character. Silence also fosters self-reliance. It allows you to examine your thoughts and desires without distraction or external pressure. Consider the analogy of a calm lake. When the water is still, the reflection is clear. When agitated by wind or interference, clarity is lost. By cultivating inner stillness, you can see reality as it truly is, rather than through the distortions of emotional reactivity or societal expectation. Practically, this means pausing before responding to criticism, resisting the urge to over-explain, and choosing words deliberately when they serve purpose. Over time, silence becomes a shield against manipulation and a conduit for wisdom. People are naturally drawn to those who do not overextend their energy for the approval of others, because this detachment signals security, confidence, and inner alignment. Your calm becomes contagious, your presence becomes magnetic, and your silence communicates more than any frantic effort could. Ultimately, mastering the power of silence is a lifelong exercise in discipline, patience, and self-respect. It is an active, deliberate practice that transforms ordinary interactions into arenas of self-sovereignty, where influence and respect arise not from volume but from poise, clarity, and the quiet force of presence. Lesson 10: Emotional independence is freedom. One of the most transformative Stoic lessons is learning that your emotional state does not have to be dictated by others. Many people unknowingly surrender their inner peace to external circumstances, opinions, or relationships, allowing fleeting events to dictate their joy, anger, or sadness. Emotional independence is the recognition that while you cannot control every situation, you can control your response to it. Epictetus emphasized this principle when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When you internalize this, you realize that true freedom comes from refusing to hand over your emotional power to anyone or anything outside your influence. Imagine a scenario in which a close friend or colleague criticizes your work harshly. Most people would feel anger, resentment, or defensiveness. The Stoic, however, pauses, assesses the validity of the criticism, and chooses a response that aligns with their values and goals. Emotional independence does not mean suppressing feelings, rather, it is the deliberate choice to experience emotions without being dominated by them. It is the ability to acknowledge hurt, disappointment, or frustration without allowing them to disrupt your inner equilibrium. This mastery over your own mind liberates you from the invisible chains of external judgment and frees you to pursue your purpose with unwavering focus. In romantic relationships, emotional independence is especially crucial. When your happiness relies solely on another person's attention, approval, or affection, you become vulnerable to manipulation, disappointment, and emotional instability. The moment you cultivate emotional self-sufficiency, you shift from being reactive to proactive, from being dependent to being self-possessed. You no longer need constant reassurance, validation, or approval, because your sense of worth is grounded in your own values, actions, and integrity. Practically applying emotional independence requires consistent awareness and practice. Begin by identifying areas in life where your emotions are being controlled externally, whether through social media, relationships, or professional pressures, and intentionally reclaim your autonomy. For example, if a friend cancels plans unexpectedly, instead of reacting with frustration or disappointment, recognize the event as beyond your control and choose how it affects you. Replace habitual emotional responses with conscious decisions that align with your principles and priorities. In daily life, this might mean maintaining composure during a tense meeting, responding calmly to criticism, or refusing to overreact to petty provocations. Over time, these small acts compound into a resilient mental framework that protects your well-being from the unpredictability of the world. Emotional independence also strengthens relationships rather than weakens them. When you approach interactions from a place of stability rather than need, your presence becomes more attractive, respectful, and grounded. Others are drawn to your composure, reliability, and consistency because it reflects confidence and inner alignment. This is the freedom Stoics value most, the knowledge that you are the master of your mind, and no external circumstance, person, or event can dictate your inner peace unless you allow it. Living emotionally independent is not a rejection of connection. It is the conscious choice to maintain sovereignty over your inner life, ensuring that relationships and circumstances complement rather than control you. This practice is a cornerstone of personal power, self-respect, and the unshakable foundation on which a fulfilling life is built. Practically applying emotional independence requires consistent awareness and practice. Begin by identifying areas in life where your emotions are being controlled externally, whether through social media, relationships, or professional pressures, and intentionally reclaim your autonomy. For example, if a friend cancels plans unexpectedly, instead of reacting with frustration or disappointment, recognize the event as beyond your control and choose how it affects you. Replace habitual emotional responses with conscious decisions that align with your principles and priorities. In daily life, this might mean maintaining composure during a tense meeting, responding calmly to criticism, or refusing to overreact to petty provocations. Over time, these small acts compound into a resilient mental framework that protects your well-being from the unpredictability of the world. Emotional independence also strengthens relationships rather than weakens them. When you approach interactions from a place of stability rather than need, your presence becomes more attractive, respectful, and grounded. Others are drawn to your composure, reliability, and consistency because it reflects confidence and inner alignment. This is the freedom Stoics value most, the knowledge that you are the master of your mind, and no external circumstance, person, or event can dictate your inner peace unless you allow it. Living emotionally independent is not a rejection of connection, it is the conscious choice to maintain sovereignty over your inner life, ensuring that relationships and circumstances complement rather than control you. This practice is a cornerstone of personal power, self-respect, and the unshakable foundation on which a fulfilling life is built. Lesson 11. Value your time as your greatest asset. Time is the one resource that no one can replenish. Unlike money, possessions, or status, once a moment passes, it is gone forever. The Stoics understood this deeply. Seneca repeatedly reminded us that life is not measured by the number of breaths we take but by the moments that take our breath away, and that squandering time on trivialities or people who do not respect it is the surest path to regret. To truly live a life of purpose and autonomy, you must treat your time as your most valuable asset. This begins with recognizing where your time goes and evaluating whether each activity, conversation, or commitment genuinely serves your higher goals, values, or well-being. Most people spend hours distracted by social media, gossip, meaningless arguments, or obligations that carry no weight in the grand scheme of their lives. They sacrifice their most finite resource, time, chasing approval, fleeting pleasure, or the validation of others. Stoic wisdom teaches the opposite. Prioritize what aligns with your purpose, reject what is unnecessary, and recognize that saying no is as powerful as saying yes. When you start valuing your time, you become deliberate with your presence, energy, and attention. It is not arrogance, it is sovereignty. It is the knowledge that your time is sacred, finite, and deserving of careful stewardship. For instance, consider how many hours are lost in reactive responses, scrolling endlessly through social media, responding to messages that bring no value, attending events that drain rather than uplift. Each wasted hour is a small surrender, a subtle erosion of your autonomy and potential. By reclaiming your time, you reclaim your power, your focus, and your ability to direct your life toward meaningful outcomes. The Stoic principle here is clear: the measure of a life well lived is not in external validation or accumulation but in deliberate, purposeful use of each passing moment. Practically, valuing your time means making conscious choices about what deserves your attention and energy. Begin by auditing your daily life, noting where time is spent and identifying the activities, interactions, or habits that do not contribute to your growth, happiness, or purpose. Then, deliberately reallocate that time toward actions that enrich your life, whether that is working on a meaningful project, investing in personal growth, or nurturing relationships that reciprocate value and respect. Setting boundaries is essential. If someone consistently disrespects your time, fails to honor commitments, or drains your energy without contributing positively, the Stoic approach is clear: reduce or eliminate that engagement. This is not cruelty but clarity, acknowledging that your attention is too precious to give freely to those who do not recognize its worth. Valuing your time also transforms your relationships. People are naturally drawn to those who respect themselves and their schedule. When you operate from a position of temporal abundance, knowing what matters, protecting your hours, and not bending to every demand, you signal high value, independence, and integrity. The practical application extends to all areas of life, from professional endeavors to personal relationships, from leisure activities to creative pursuits. Each decision, each interaction, becomes an intentional choice that either enhances or depletes your life. By consistently prioritizing what matters, you cultivate focus, discipline, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that every day is spent moving toward your goals, on your terms. Time, once lost, cannot be reclaimed, and the Stoic lesson is clear: protect it, honor it, and live as if every moment is a rare treasure, for in truth, it is the only one you are ever guaranteed. Lesson 12: Detachment from outcomes creates freedom. One of the most powerful teachings of Stoicism is the art of detachment, not from life itself, but from the results of your actions. The Stoics recognized that while you can control your effort, your intentions, and your decisions, you cannot control how the world, other people, or circumstances will respond. Marcus Aurelius emphasized repeatedly that we should focus only on what is within our power and accept the rest with equanimity. This lesson is transformative because so much human suffering comes from attachment to outcomes, expecting specific results from relationships, careers, investments, or personal goals. When your happiness and self-worth hinge entirely on external validation or uncontrollable circumstances, you live perpetually on unstable ground. Consider the countless hours people spend agonizing over a text message response, a promotion decision, or social recognition. They invest their emotional energy into factors beyond their control, and every delay, denial, or misstep becomes a source of stress and disappointment. Detachment, in the Stoic sense, does not mean apathy or disengagement. It means engaging fully, putting forth your best effort, and then releasing your obsession with the result. It is the recognition that your value, peace, and agency come from your choices and actions, not from whether a goal is achieved exactly as imagined. Practically applying detachment begins with reframing your mindset. Before entering a situation, remind yourself that you control only your effort, integrity, and focus, not the external outcome. For instance, when delivering a presentation, focus on communicating clearly, preparing thoroughly, and giving your best performance, rather than obsessing over whether every audience member will approve or every goal will be met. In relationships, detachment means loving, supporting, or giving your attention without becoming enslaved to reciprocity or approval. You can act kindly, set boundaries, and communicate openly, but the response of the other person is beyond your control, and letting go of the emotional weight of that uncertainty cultivates freedom. Anecdotally, many successful individuals attribute their resilience and clarity to detachment. They continue to work diligently, take risks, and engage with life fully, but their self-worth remains independent of immediate success or recognition. The Stoic approach transforms pressure into focus. The energy that would otherwise be consumed by worry about the outcome is redirected into mastery, creativity, and intentional action. Over time, this creates a profound sense of inner freedom. You no longer act out of fear, neediness, or desperation, but from purpose, alignment, and deliberate choice. Life continues to unfold unpredictably, as it always will, but when your happiness is anchored in your own efforts rather than external results, nothing can destabilize your sense of self. The Stoics taught that peace is found not in controlling the uncontrollable but in mastering your internal response, and detachment from outcomes is the gateway to this freedom. Conclusion: the quiet revolution of self-mastery. As we reach the culmination of these 15 Stoic lessons, it becomes clear that the path to true power, clarity, and freedom is internal. The world outside will always be unpredictable, unfair, and often chaotic. People will act irrationally, opportunities will come and go, and circumstances will test your patience and resolve at every turn. But the Stoics remind us that the only thing truly within your control is your mind, your choices, and the principles by which you live. This is not a theoretical concept, it is a practical, daily exercise in awareness, discipline, and reflection. Each lesson, from the recognition of impermanence to the strength found in indifference, from mastering desire to embracing rejection as a catalyst, is a tool that builds the framework for a life of resilience, purpose, and dignity. Think of it as a quiet revolution happening within you. While the world rages with chaos, you cultivate a calm, composed, and unshakable presence. You become a force not by dominating others, not by controlling outcomes, but by mastering yourself. This internal sovereignty allows you to navigate life with poise, to face adversity without fear, and to act decisively without distraction. Practical application of these lessons requires consistency and intention. You cannot simply read them and hope for transformation, they must be practiced daily. Start with small steps, observe your reactions, question your impulses, reflect on your attachments, and align your actions with your values. Journal about your choices, meditate on challenges, and remind yourself that external validation is optional. It does not define your worth. As you embody these lessons, you will notice a profound shift in your relationships, career, and overall sense of peace. People will respond differently to you not because you demand it, but because your presence carries weight. Your words, your silence, your calm, and your consistency become your signature. This is the power of living stoically. It is not flashy. It does not require dramatic declarations or grand gestures. It is quiet, subtle, and deeply magnetic. The transformation is internal first, and only then does it ripple outward, affecting every interaction and decision. Those who misunderstand or underestimate you may be surprised, unsettled, or even challenged by your newfound steadiness. That is natural. You are no longer the version of yourself who reacted impulsively, sought approval, or allowed circumstances to dictate your mood. You are the evolved version, calm, discerning, principled, and free. Finally, remember this: mastery of self is not a destination, it is a lifelong journey. Each day presents new challenges and opportunities to practice the principles outlined in these lessons. There will be moments when old habits creep back, when emotions rise unchecked, and when external pressures threaten to pull you from your center. In those moments, return to the Stoic foundation, focus on what is within your control, remain indifferent to what is not, act according to virtue, and align your choices with purpose. Over time, the accumulation of these practices builds an unshakable inner fortress. You will no longer fear rejection, judgment, or loss because your worth is no longer contingent on external factors. Your peace, your dignity, and your power are now internalized. Sculpted grace reminds you that this journey is yours to own. You do not need approval, applause, or recognition from anyone. Your evolution is your own. Every lesson, every reflection, every moment of self-discipline adds to a life that is meaningful, purposeful, and unassailable. And as you walk this path, remember that true freedom comes not from escaping the world, but from mastering yourself within it. In mastering yourself, you have mastered life itself.